I have a bunch of officers receiving this, and from a variety of units. Sergeant Larry Haley, Corporal Santos was also on this case. Corporal Mike Power, PO3, Mike Cowell, Gabe Stone, Shane Kirk, Kyle Berry, Shaun Lynch, Gregory Pagonis, Andre Smith, and Larryce Ham. Again, some of them are here, some are not. If you're here, come on down, join us up at the top of the stage. And I'll start reading. On October 11th, officers responded to Fair Garden Lane in Clarksburg, Maryland for a violent MO call. The call taker could hear smoke alarms in the background during the call. When officers spoke to the suspect's girlfriend outside the residence, she stated that during a domestic violence incident, the suspect had begun lighting the kitchen on fire. Officers immediately observed heavy smoke coming from the residence, but they could not see the suspect. The officers entered the home with Montgomery County fire rescue personnel who like fires. We don't. And to locate the suspect and put out the fire. Upon entering the kitchen area where the fire was concentrated, the suspect was found standing near the stove. He was clearly emotionally disturbed and began throwing objects at the officers and fire rescue personnel. The officers and fire rescue tactically retreated to the front of the residence. Officers Shane Kirk, Gabe Stone, Andre Smith, and Sergeant Haley met briefly, then re-entered the townhouse, again attempting to get the suspect to come out of the residence. The suspect refused and continued to hurl burning objects at the officers. Officers once again withdrew to the front of the residence. They continued attempts to reason with the suspect, but he would not comply. An immediate action team was formed and additional officers brought a ballistic shield to the scene. The adjoining townhouses were evacuated by officers. Officers could hear the suspect opening and closing kitchen drawers and believed that he was arming himself with a knife or knives before their next entrance. As the fire was growing in intensity, a decision was made to enter the residence with the IAT and arrest the subject before the smoke and fire took his life or spread to the adjoining townhomes. The officers brought the shields into a line, and the officers re-entered the residence as an immediate action team. As they rounded the corner into the kitchen area, the room was dark and filled with smoke. It was extremely thick. A fire was burning freely in the kitchen, and the suspect was secreted behind an island row inside the kitchen. He was holding a flashlight in his hand, and he was pointing it at the officers, trying to get them to shoot him. Protected by the ballistic shields, the officers were able to get close enough to deploy an electronic control device, or taser, which struck the suspect and knocked him to the floor below the stove. There was now a fire on top of the stove that was about 3 feet high. Sergeant Haley and Officer Lynch were able to knock the fire down with a fire extinguisher, while the other officers continued to fight with the suspect below the fire to get him into custody. The smoke grew even more intense as the fire was put out. The suspect resisted arrest, and it took several officers a few minutes to get him into custody. Once in custody, the suspect was carried out of the residence and given first aid by waiting fire rescue personnel. The suspect was ultimately transported to the hospital for treatment and received an emergency evaluation. Once the scene was secured, all 10 officers were transported to Holy Cross Hospital in Germantown for treatment for smoke inhalation. All the officers were released. The suspect was charged with a number of, I think it was 39 total charges. The actions of these officers in this case saved the suspect's life and prevented significant property damage to the row of townhouses. Under extremely difficult circumstances, fire, smoke, limited visibility, and a chaotic scene, a large hostile suspect, the officers were able to make not only a plan to keep the other people in the townhouse row safe, but to get the suspect under arrest and put out the fire. They used amazing restraint and displayed incredible firearms discipline not to shoot the suspect, as he clearly was trying suicide by cop. These officers' courageous efforts highlight how much we as a department value the sanctity of life. They put themselves into harm's way multiple times to get this suspect the mental health treatment that he needed. They make me proud to be a county police officer.